Welcome to the fastest stop in town. Today on the Succah Daf Nun Vav, we are going to begin on Nun Ham Beis, 2 lines from the bottom, with the words of Achiluk Lechem Hapanim. When it came to the division of the Lechem Hapanim, the Mishnah said that there was actually 3 times of the year. Rashi says that's the Shosh Regalim, that all of the 24 Mishmars were equal when it came to the Mori HaRegalim, which it came to the various karbonos that were brought on this holiday, as well as the division of the Lechem Hapanim, which typically we would not divvy up the Lechem Hapanim to all 24 Mishmaros. It was given some to the Mishmar that was coming in, and some from the Mishmar that was going out, as each Mishmar served for 1 week. Tana Rabbanim. How do we know that when it comes to the Regalim, that the Lechem Hapanim were divided equally? As we continue to our last daf of Nun Vav Amud Aleph, Talmud Leimer, the pasuk says Chelek kechelek yoichelu. So we derive from this pasuk kechelek avoda kachelek achila. Just like the chelek of avoda, says Rashi, the avoda is equal, so too the chil is equal. Shabav kulan kechelek avoda. Disravel el mivoy b'chol avos nafshay v'sharis. So the avodah is the same, and therefore it's logical that the eating also is the same. So ma'yachila, ileim karbanos, maybe it's referring to that they're able to partake of the karbanos equally. Mahasam nafka l'kayin hamakri ba'yisel lo'isiyeh. So we already learned that the person who brings the carbon lo siyeh, so that person is the one who's able to eat it. So we already know by that pasuk that there's a din that the Kohen eats that which he's connected to as far as the avoda. So why does it say chel kechelek yochelu? What is this reboy? It must be coming to tell you something else. El lechem apanim. So yachol av b'chayvos habois shlomach masaregel beregel. Let's say we're talking about other obligations that a person needs to bring, and they didn't have to bring it on Shosh Regalim, but because they're oil regel during that time, so therefore they decided to wait until that period of time to bring certain karbanos. So maybe you would think also that, says Rashi, that you zoichin be'avodas and v'yachloku, that they should be equal when it comes to the avoda as well as the division. Terminolomer lavad mimcharav al ha'avois. So ma mimcharav ha'avois zelazeh. So what is it literally that is sold one to another? Ani b'shamati v'yata b'shamcha. I am the Shabbos, and you are on a different Shabbos. So this pasuk has come to tell you that when it comes to someone who that is their mishmar, that shvua kavua, this is their set week. So when it comes to those type of karbanos, that is something which that individual mishmar gets. It's not divided equally. So Rashi says, "V'nedarim v'nedavois, the karbanos sibor diisnu b'shar yumos hashana." This is referring to, again, in neder, you may have, based on Baal Ta'acher, a certain amount of time to bring it, but you could bring it any time. So therefore, it's not linked or tied to the Shosh Regalim, as well as any other Karbas Tibor that's brought during the year. Barahin lo mishmar hamishamish listu b'chal haregel shelo yehi shavin behen el mishmar shem oisa shvua yehi kibishar yimos hashana. Just like any other time of the year, no one would contest it. It obviously belongs to the one that's their mishmar. So too, if that mishmar falls out during one of these Shosh Regalim, they're also entitled to these things as well. Okay. Let's now continue. Then it says, but Saras, on the holiday of Shavuos, Aymerlo Hiluch. So, to continue in that expression, the Mishnah said, Hiluch Matzah, Hiluch Chametz. It talks about first Matzah, and then the division of the Chametz. So Itmar, Rab Oimer Sukkah V'achach Zman. There's a question, when you have 2 brachos, which bracha do you say first? Sukkah or Zman Neshechianu? Says Rashi, Sukkah V'achach Zman. Mishlo Beirach Shechianu B'siyasa. As we mentioned before, some people actually will say Shechianu, which is not our minhag. We say it on Kiddush. We say both brachos in Kiddush. But it used to be, at least according to some shittas, that they would actually make the bracha upon making the sukkah. So let's say it's already there. But when you begin and you sit, Mavarach Shtayim, Sukkah, Mizman. So which one do you do first? So he says, first you make the bracha of Leishiv Sukkah, and then only afterwards you make the bracha of Shechianu. Rabbi Bar Chana Omer Zman V'Achach Sukkah. He says, no, the other way around. First you make the bracha of Shechianu, and then afterwards the Leishiv Sukkah. The question is, why? So Rabbi Omer Sukkah V'Achach Zman Chiyav V'Diyam Adav. What is the Chiyav? The Chiyav of the day is to sit in the Sukkah. And therefore, the first thing that should be mentioned is Leishiv Sukkah, because that is what we're doing. Rabba Barachana Omer Zman V'Achach Sukkah, based on the very famous reason, Tadar V'Sheinu Tadar Tadar Kodem. When you have two things, we look at the thing that happens more often. So Leishiv Sukkah only happens on Sukkahs. However, the bracha of Shechianu is said on numerous occasions and also on numerous things. So therefore, it makes sense that the Shechianu should be for Leishiv. So Lema Rabba Barachana Beplota de Beisham Beis Hill K'mefagi. Maybe their machlokus is totally on a machlokus found in the 8th parak in Brachos, the famous Gemara of the Tanur and Barim Shemin Beisham Beis Hillel Besuda. Beishamai Omer Mevarach Al Hayam V'Achach Mevarach Al Yain. Beishamai says, which of course on Friday night when we make Kiddush, we know we don't do this, but he says first you make the bracha Mekadesh HaShabbos, and then the second bracha is Brei Pri Hagafen. Beis Hillel Omer, which is of course what we do, Mevarach Al Yain Mevarach Al Yomi. Rabbi Shami Omer Mevarach Al Yom Yalkach Mevarach Al Yayin, and he gives two reasons. Why? Why do you first make the bracha on the day? Shehayom Gorim L'Yayin Shiavo, because the day is what causes the wine to come. You're not going to be taking wine necessarily, except for the fact that you are now on Shabbos. It's now Shabbos, so the day is what causes you to take the wine. So therefore, the day is what's kosher. Also, the Kfar Kiddush Hayoim V'Dayin Yain Lo Ba. This is the second explanation. Is because first it's Shabbos. Right now it becomes Shabbos. However, the Chiyuv of the bracha Brei Pri Hagafen is not until you make Kiddush, and therefore because of that, says Rashi, V'Oy Tam Acher Shekiddush Hayoim Elav Mishach HaShecha. It just happens. V'Dayin Yain Lo Ba Lefanav. The wine's not in front of you yet. So you can only make the bracha of Brei Pri Hagafen once you have the wine in front of you. But the second it's Shkia, at that moment, it's now Shabbos. So therefore it makes sense that you should first be Mekadesh HaShabbos and then Yain, because that's how it happens, in order. Beis Hillel Omer Mevarach Al Yain V'Achach Mevarach Al Yoim. Shayayin Garim L'Kiddusha Sh'Ta'imar. That the wine is what causes Kiddush to be said. Because you can't make Kiddush, let's say you have no food, no drink, you have nothing, so you can't make Kiddush. It's the wine which allows you to make Kiddush. Davar Acher, another explanation, and this is why we're bringing this down. Birchas Hayayin Tedira. Birchas Hayom Ina Tedira. Tadar V'Sheinu Tadar Tadar Kodem. So, when it comes to wine, you can drink wine on Shabbos or on a weekday. So that bracha, Brei Pri Hagafen, is more frequent than the bracha Mekadesh HaShabbos. So Leima Rab Yomi Beis Shammai. Rabbi Barachana Yomi Beis Hillel. They're both giving the reasonings similar to what is being said. So it's the simple one is Beis Hillel. Beis Hillel says it's Tadar V'Sheinu Tadar. So too, when it comes to, do you make the bracha of Shechianu or the bracha of Leishiv Sukkah first? So you should make the bracha of Shechianu first because that's Tadar. So Amalach Rab, Anad Yamar Hillel Beis Hillel. I could even hold like Beis Hillel when it comes to Kiddush. Because Ad Kan Lo Kamer Beis Hillel Hasam, the only time Beis Hillel says this din over there is Davka by Kiddush. El Shayayin Garim L'Kiddush Timer. Because it has a second explanation, that also it's the wine that causes the Kiddush to be said. So certainly in that case, you would make the bracha on the wine first. Abul Hacha, when it comes to our situation, the Sukkah, Milav Zman, Milo Yamrin and Sukkah, if it would be that there would be no Shechianu, would you not still say Leishiv Sukkah? So it's not that, for example, when it comes to the wine, is connected to making Kiddush. However, Shechianu is not connected to Leishiv Sukkah. You could still say Leishiv Sukkah. So therefore, according to him, it's possible it's the other way. And he would say that you first make Leishiv before Shechianu. Why would you want to hold like Beis Shammai? The point is, it's not necessarily tied in, this machlokas, to that. Ad Kan Lo Amar Beis Shammai, the only time Beis Shammai said that first you say Mekadesh Shabbos, and then Brei Pri Hagafen, El Shayom Gon L'Yayin Shiavoy, because he says it's very logical. It's the day that causes the wine to come. Because it's the day that caused the wine to come, so that's the reason why you should first make the bracha mekadosh Shabbos. Ilav Sukkah. If let's say you don't have a Sukkah, Milu Amrin Zman, you would still say Shechianu. Shechianu is not connected to the Sukkah. It's connected to the Chag. Okay, stop there for a second. Ilav Sukkah, says Rashi. Ilav Yeshiva Sukkah, if there's no dwelling in a Sukkah, Milu Amrin Zman, Kigon, Hayuchi Drachim. Let's say you're traveling. The Peturim in a Sukkah, so you're Paturim in a Sukkah, Amrin Zman, Bishvil HaMoyed, Kamo B'Sharagom. You still have to say, even though you don't sit in the Sukkah during the other Shalosh Regalim, you still say Shachianu, so it's not tied in. It's not. So we learned in the Mishnah, which we quoted already. Vatzeres, Amrul Hilach Matzah, Hilach Chametz. Bahahacha, the Chametz Iker. The fact that we first mentioned, we mentioned Matzah, then we mentioned Chametz. But over here, Chametz is Iker, Matzah Tafel. The Katani Hilach Matzah, Hilach Chametz, Tif the Rav. The Chor, it's a Tif the Rav. So Amrul Rav, Tanoihi. The Katani Hilach Matzah, Hilach Chametz. So it's totally on. Again, you could say it either direction. Let's look at this Rashi on the Mishnah to remind ourselves what this is talking about. Rashi says on the Mishnah, on the previous Amud, about Seres Kishira b'Shabbos, when it falls out on Shabbos, the Yeshul Chiluk Chametz, we divide up Chametz the Shtei Halechem, because there's the Shtei Halechem. V'chiluk lechem aponim shehu matzah. So the question is, which one is the ikr? Is it the lechem haponim, which we do all the time, which is chametz, or is it the shtei halechem? Is it the shtei halechem, which is chametz, or is it the lechem haponim, which is matzah? So that is the question. So Rashi says, l'chol echad kishenaisnul chelkoi. When a portion is given, Halach Matzah. We mentioned about the Matzah, which is referring to the Lechem Aponim. When we talk about the Lechem, Shtei Lechem, Armul Hilach Chametz. Why? Lefi she'ein cholkin carbon keneged carbon, el mikol echad chelkoi. You have to divide each one in its own portion. You can't say, you know what, there's a bunch of bread here, there's a bunch of bread here, you take this, and I'll take that. No. Each one has to be divided separately. So we see there's a machlokas. What is the one which is done, let's say, first? Is it the chametz, which is the shtei lechem, which is connected to shvuas, or is it the lechem aponim, which is tadir, which is the matzah? So it's a machlokas tanoim. Fine. Dorish Rav Nachman bar Rav Chisda loy kedivri Rav di'amer sukkah v'achasman. He paskins that first you make a shechian and then a sukkah. Rav Sheshes b'rei Rav Yidi omer sukkah v'achasman. The hilchasa sukkah v'achasman. The halacha is first you make the leish of a sukkah and then the shechian. Even though, as I mentioned a few blot ago, and we learned this, that it's actually, according to many minhagim, they flip it on one day of Yom Tov, the first day of the Yom Tov to the second. Which one is said first and which one is said second? But this the Gemara cleanly says over here that Sukkah and then Zman. Look at this Taisus. The Mishnah says Hilach Matzah, Hilach Chametz. So Hilach Matzah again sounds like we do the Lechem Hapanim, which is Tadir, and we're saying that Shechianu, which is not Tadir, is done last. Inami Choshev Nami Lechem Hapanim Chayves Hayoim. The Lechem Hapanim is also considered to be Chayves Hayoim. Alpavishim Mishabes She'ora, even though it's from the Shabbos that passed. So there's an element of Chayves Hayom, just like the Shtei Lechem. Okay. Right. So then the Mishnah said, Mishmesh is Mana Kavua, Vishar Karbonos Sibor. So he said that the Mishmor who has this set week, so the din is they are Makav the Tamidim, the Darim, the Davos, and all the other Karbonos Sibor, which are not tied in to the regel itself. So the Gemara asks, L'sui mai, L'sui por helam davar shel tzibor. It's coming to also include the par helam davar shel tzibor. It says Rashi, in ira bahen beregel, if it turns out during the regolim, she'avru aveira baharas beistin, mentioned at great length at Masechtas Harius, that a person we did based on erroneous psak of the beistin, So there is a par helam davar shel tzibor. If the tzibor is discussing exactly how many have to be part of this, that this carbon should be brought. There's seir avodas kachavim, as well as the seir, the goat, that is brought when it comes to avodas kachavim, in the event where the tzibor is oisik in the avera of idol worship. So they also will take place. They will also take part in that avoda, even though the truth is it's not really tied to the regalim, but since it happened during that time, that's they also bring. The who makriv is a kol. They bring everything. So lasui kaitzim mizbeach. It's coming to include the kaitzim mizbeach, as we mentioned many times throughout Shas, but a lot in Masechta Shkalim, that when it comes to, instead of having the mizbeach idol, if no one is bringing karbanos, it doesn't look good. So therefore, we do kaitzim mizbeach, the dessert of the mizbeach, which means that we bring numerous karbanos olos for the mizbeach, even though it's not connected necessarily to a carbon sib or a chov, but we do it as kaitzim mizbeach, and that's something which is continuously done. And as we mentioned, when it comes to an ola, even though that's completely consumed, but the Kohen does partake of the oros of its hides. Let's now continue with the last Mishnah in this Masechta. Yom Tov HaSamuch HaShabbos. So let's say you have Yom Tov, which is right before Shabbos, Bein L'Fnei Bein L'Acharei. Whether it's before it, let's say Yom Tov falls on a Friday, or after it, let's say Yom Tov falls out on a Sunday. So the question is, the Mishmor it ends like on a Shabbos, the other Mishmor comes in, and the question is, so technically, you're kind of stuck there if you're doing the Mishmor because you can't leave because the next day is Yom Tov. Also, the Mishmor would really again start on Shabbos. They have to be there already the day before because Friday is Yom Tov. So it's only fair that they should be able to get some chelek because they are connected to having to be there earlier or later because of Yom Tov. So the Mishnah says, in that situation, everyone is equal when it comes to the distribution of lechem upon him. Let's say there's a break in between the two. So for example, let's say Yom Tov ends on Thursday night. So a lot of people will say, you know what, I might as well just stay in Israel until after Shabbos. I'm not going to start traveling on Friday, so that's what I'll do. So in that situation, it's not as connected because technically there is a day of a weekday there. So Mishmar Shizman Kavua Hainatel Eser Chalos. So you say the one that's their week, they get 10. And the group that stayed, they get 2. So give them something. However, Shari Mos Hashana, during the normal times, Hanichnas Naitel Sheish, V'yekta Naitel Sheish. There's 12. So it makes sense. One gets 6, the other one gets 6. Rabbi Yehuda says not so fast. Hanichnas Naitel Sheva, V'yekta Naitel Chamesh. The ones that come in get 7. The ones that go out get 5, which the Gemara is going to wonder, what's the difference? You're still going to end up getting 12. If I could use the expression, it's a half a dozen of one, or 6 of the other. So what's the difference? You're going to end up getting 12. So in order to be able to show who's the Mishmar coming in, they would divide their lechem upon him in the north, and the ones leaving in the south. However, Bilga, this Mishmar, even when they come in, we used to punish them and kind of make them look unique, that when they would start their Mishmar, even then it was divided in the south. And their ring was locked and set, and their window was clogged up or closed. Says Rashi, there's actually 24 rings, in the place where those who were the butchers did the chopping up of the karbanos. Keneged Esrim, so why 24? Keneged Esrim, the Arba Mishmaros. It makes sense. There's 24 rings where again it was all. That's where the meat was cut up. Connected the 24 mishmaros. But in the student the Avni Ritzba, and it was placed by the floor. V'tabas tucha mitzad echad, and the ring was open on one side. V'hoiv mala, and it was turned up. V'machnes savar habehemo tocha, and they would put the neck of the animal into it. V'choiz v'hoipech pischa. V'toich haritzba v'tabas shel Bilga kavua, that one was set, was not able to be opened up. Ve'na hafeches, it could not be turned around. Kadei shetishtamish b'shal acherim b'ginai hulo, so that they would have to actually borrow from others to use it, and it was actually ginai. So it was a little bit embarrassing that they weren't able to use the tabas like the other 23 mishmaros in the same function. The chalona stuma, chalonos hayu bebeis hachalifos. So there was a place in the base of Midrash which is called, in the area which is called the base hachalifos, b'oivi koisle hataim, in this chamber, shebesvainu shel heichel, which is on the north of the heichel, shesham goinzin es sekinehem, that the base chalifos was a place where they would actually put their knives, as is brought down in the Succah. Midos, the satmo chalono shel bilga. They closed up those windows so they weren't able to really utilize it properly. So again, this was something which is embarrassing. They weren't able to use the rings properly. They weren't able to use the window area properly to hide their knives. So we'll understand why. What did they do that was so bad? We're going to talk about that in a second. Before we do that, doesn't mean before the first day of Yom Tov. After the last day, Hainu Shabbos Shabbat Chachag. So that's the same thing as Shabbos in the middle of the of the Yom Tov. My taima, kivan dahani makme v'hani machari. Since they had to come early and they had to stay late an extra day, taking about a milsa kihechi the necha b'hadi. The Chachamim instituted that they'll be able to also partake because they have no choice; they have to be there anyway. Chal Yoim Echad, says Nun Vav Amud Beis, which is the last Amud now. Bahani Tardi Ma'avitayu. So this is jumping to the sheet of Rabbi Huda. Why, when it comes to normal circumstance, instead of 6 and 6, he says 7 and 5. So Rabbi Yitzchak Biskar Hagafas Delasais. We give them more because the mishmar that enters has the additional responsibility of closing up the doors at night. Says Rashi, Shemishamar hanichnas megeh hadalasos arvis shepasach oisa mishmar hayoytze. The mishmar that leaves open keeps them open, and the mishmar nichnas closes the doors. So since they do an extra service, so therefore we reward them. So v'neimale dal b'dal. Why don't we say the one who leaves, the one who's entering, says Rashi, Haser chayk zeh mikan b'shvil shiasiruhu etzlecha im toitel achshav sheva yitol shabbos haba mishmar nichnas sheva yata toil ata b'shava kedei shetitol gas ata l'shavos haba l'shav dal haser. Okay, basically what Rashi is saying is it doesn't make any sense. Oh, we're giving this great reward, but the next week you're being punished by only getting 5. It's the same thing. If you get 7 and 5, it should be the same thing as 6 and 6. So on this, Omer Abaya, Boitzina Tava Mikra, that when it comes to a gourd, a person would rather have that gourd earlier, says Rashi, even if it's smaller. Mashal Hedidhu, Dalat Katanani, Nosnilcha, I have a small gourd I'm going to give to you. The Mechuber, Im Tirtza, if you want, with Tlushachshav, you can detach it now, Tolosh. The Im Tirtza, if you want, Lanichel, you can leave it and let it grow. Anshi Yagdil, let it grow a little bit bigger. Vatasa Kara, and then you'll be able to get this larger gourd. I'd rather have it now. Shemel Achrazman, Yischarit Bo, maybe you'll have regret. Or Shemel Yitzdark Zelza. You don't need it. Hachinami Gabi Mishmaris Mi Sharoi Lito Akshav Lo Yamtin L'Shabbos Haba. If I have the opportunity to take more now, so I'm going to rather take more now than to have equal later on. So therefore, we see from here the tremendous concept of what's called in finance the idea of the time value of money. You would rather have more now, even though you can have 12 at the end of the day. You'd rather have more now than later, because $1 today is more than $1 tomorrow, because it can be invested, and that's the same idea. The mishmar who comes in would rather have 7 than have 6 and 6. Alma Rabbi Huda, Musafin Cholkin. When it comes to Musaf, it's divided. Says Rashi, Kehechi depalgi belechem upon him. Just like they divide the lechem upon him, the shomer nechnas vayotze palginami beoirois hamusafin shel kol Shabbos. They also divide the hides of every Shabbos. Meisvei mishmar hayotze soise tamish shel shachar musafin. It says that the mishmar that goes is able to get the morning as well as the musaf, because that's the last thing that they're involved in. The mishmar hanechneses, the new mishmar that comes in, soise tamish shel benar bayim ubazichin. They get the tamish shel benar bayim as well as the bazichin, which are the spices, as Rashi says, misalkin u'misadrin lechem upon him, that they arrange the lechem upon him, u'makatirin shnei bazichi lavoina, and there's these two frankincense that are brought and that are taken from the table, and they remove it from there. The ilu musafin chalkin l'katani. It doesn't say that the musaf is split up. So haitana b'chaluka lo'ko'ayri. They're not talking about the division, they're talking about who actually does the avoda. But it's possible that even according to the Shita, the chalukah is done equally. Amar Rabba, b'hatana debei Shmuel demari b'chalukah, he does mention b'chalukah, musafin chalukah lokatani. The Tana debei Shmuel. And Mishmar hayotzis, the Mishmar that leaves, also Tamid shel shachar musafin, Mishmar hanechneses, also Tamid shel ben arbayim muzichin. And then it says, Arba Kohanim hayu nichnasim sham. There are 4 Kohanim. Shnayim mishmarzu, Shnayim mishmarzu. V'chaltin lechem upon him. And it says that they would divide the lechem upon him. The ilu musafin chalkin lokatani to Rabbi Yehuda tiyufta. So in fact, this is a tiyufta that it's not true. When it comes to the musaf, it was not divided, but rather it was among the 2 mishmaros. Rather, it was given to the mishmar who was leaving. Hanechnasim chalkin musafin. So they divided in the north. Why could they shiruhen shehein nechnasim? So everyone knows that they're the mishmar coming in. Yoitzin chalkam daram kadei shiru shehein yoitzin. So everyone knows they're the ones that are leaving. However, bilgul oyam chalekas badarim. Why in the south? Tanaban. There's a story. Mas Miriam bas bilga shehemira daita b'holcha v'nasa was sarjiyat echad memalchi avonim. So he went that this person Miriam bas bilga, she had an issue, and she went to the Sargit from among the Greek kings. And when they entered into the Heichel, to the base of Mikdash, he was hitting. They were hitting the Heichel with a shoe, and they were hitting it on the mizbech. The Amra Lucas. Lucas means wolf. Ad masai ata michla memainan shel Yisrael. Until how much are you going to spend our money? But you're not here at the time that we need you. So this is obviously not a very nice thing to be said. It's degrading to the Mizbech and to the base of Mikdash. And therefore, for those people who are engaged in the Avodah base of Mikdash, we want to remember this Maisa was unacceptable. And that's how they punished. In addition, for them to be divided in the south always, that the ring was set and also the windows were closed. A second shot is that Mishmar just didn't come on time. They were late. Can you imagine? Someone being late to their job. And because of that, one of the other 24 Mishmaros by name Yishavev, they did the work for them. Now, Avapi Sheshchini Harashayim Loy Nistakru Shchinu Bilga Nistakru. Even though normally when it comes to the neighbors of someone who's wicked, you don't gain anything, in this case they actually gained something because they were able to do more of the avoda in their stead. Shabilga Chalaktas Badarim. However, Shavi was rewarded that even when they left, they would always divide up in the north. I understand we're going to punish the whole Mishmar in the event that they're all late, so you're all wrong. So that makes sense. It was because of this one incident of this one person. It's not fair. Why are you punishing all of us? This is what happens a lot in a class. One kid misbehaves. Now everyone misses recess. It's not fair. The answer is in. Yes, it's true. Even though one person did it wrong, nonetheless everyone is somewhat responsible. If let's say you have a child who is misbehaving in a marketplace, we can look at the father or the mother. In other words, he came from somewhere. It came from his environment. And therefore, if a child misbehaves, we say partially responsible are the parents. So too over here, if this is what was going on by this individual, it must be there was some flaw in that mishmor, and therefore they were punished. Just because of a father and mother, you're going to punish everyone. That's how it works. That not only does the Rasha sometimes get punished, but also the neighbor, unfortunately, being in that proximity, also ends up getting punished. However, to conclude the Masechta, we should know that if we are surrounding ourselves among those who are good, the people that do the right thing, not only does Hashem look favorably upon them, but it'll also be good for us. It'll also rub off positively on us. Shnemar imrut tzadik kitayv. It's said about the tzadik kitayv, ki prima lehem yochelu. They'll be able to eat from the fruits, and therefore you'll be able to derive benefit, not just the tzaddik, but even the one who is in close proximity, which, of course, perhaps answers the question at the beginning of the second parak of why, if in fact Tavi Abdi was an Eved and he was a great knowledgeable person and he knew that Avadim were put from the Sukkah, and that's why he slept underneath the bed. So the question is, why did he sleep under the bed? He should have been home. And the answer is because he wanted to be with the Chachamim. He wanted to be surrounded by tzaddikim because of Toiv l'tzadik Toiv l'shchenai. Even though he may not have been mechuyev b'davar to be in a sukkah, however, there are other things that he could have gotten a lot from, and that's what he learned. Afil mesichaso shel tamid chachamim. Even from the simple conversation, there's so much that a person can get. It's important that we have to reconnect ourselves to those people who will give us the greatest influences. TA 6. Eze mishmar haya makriv b'shabes moisafen u'bazichin. Which was the mishmar that would bring the musaf and the bazichin. So when it came to the musaf, that was the one who left, and the bazichin were the ones that came in. TB 8. Chelik kechelik yoichelu lavan nuchar al avos. Manis rabbe. What was included in that pasuk? The fact that it says chelik kechelik yoichelu the mischalik b'regalim b'chol hamishmaros umanis mayit. So what's included? So what's included was the lechem hapanim when it falls out on the regel on Shabbos. So it's divided in that way, but it excludes chovos habos shalomach masaregel, various karbanos that were brought but were not directly tied to the holiday. In that situation, it goes to that specific mishmor. Hanulach hacholil v'slikul masechta sukkah. Hanulach hachol v'slikul masechta sukkah. Hanulach hachol v'slikul masechta sukkah. Adkan.